Hi everybody and welcome to this last video about my Sicilian repertoire. This video we're going to be covering the move 2 A6, which is called the O'Kelly variation. It's actually a pretty popular variation considering that quite a few 2700 players have tried it out recently. And the main trick behind this move A6 is aimed against people who like to play the open Sicilian, because after 3 d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, knight f6, we normally play knight to c3 and black will play e5. And as we can see, he actually has sort of a Sveshnikov structure, but instead of having the knight on c6 he has the pawn on a6, which means we can no longer play knight to b5. Now that means that our knight has to go either to b3 or f3, and for example knight f3, bishop to b4, immediately putting pressure on the e-pawn, is considered to be quite good for black. Black gets a decent game over here, and we should not go d4 for that reason. The other move that looks logical is the move c4, but I also am not a huge fan of this move, because after knight c6, d4, cd, knight takes, e5, the position still strongly resembles a Kalashnikov or a Sveshnikov Sicilian, and once again we don't have this important move knight to b5. So one way to deal with this is to go for this ending, but I believe it promises white very little. And the other thing white could go for is knight to c2, when black, because his pawn is not on d6 yet, has the option of playing bishop to c5, which I think is also kind of an advantage over the normal type of position that arises in the structure. So that leaves us with only one real move and to be played, and it's actually the only time we're really gonna use this move in our repertoire, which is the move c3. And over here, the idea is fairly simple. If we go for the normal ala pin over here, then a6 is simply pretty much a useless move. Almost any line you play over here is now better for white, so you can decide to go queen takes, or you can play c takes. And like I said, every single line is just, the move a6 is sort of superfluous and not very helpful. So nobody will play knight f6 over here. And likewise the move d5, which is a legitimate move, but it's not very good to go for queen takes over here, because after d4 followed by bishop to e3, we're normally threatening to take on c5. And once again, this move a6 is not entirely clear how useful it is. It's probably not useful at all. What black players have tried, and it's a very tricky idea, is to go knight to f6 over here. The idea of course is that there's no longer bishop to b5 check, so a6 helps in that regard. And after d4 of course black wants to take and immediately get this nice blockade on d5 against the isolated pawn position. So white should go for d4, but after c takes d4, queen a4 check has to be played, which is a little precise move that you have to know about in order to gain an advantage from this position. Queen in d7 is the main move. If you put another piece on d7, we just play queen takes d4 and we're up a full pawn. For example, bishop to d7, queen takes d4, and we can strengthen the pawn by c4 later on if we want to. So queen d7 has to be played, which means that after queen takes d4, queen takes d5 can still be played with an equal position. And white should go for the queen exchange over here. So knight takes d7 is the way that people have been playing here, and now this clever move c4 is available. So we're still retaining pressure on d4, but we've actually managed to cover our d5 pawn. So really we're just trying to win a pawn here, a very important central pawn. b5 is the move that most people go for here. C takes b5 still is not that great. I think black gets some compensation if he gets to take on d5. So I like b3, maintaining the structure. And after b takes c4, b takes c4, we're following a recent game, Lampert against Debs in 2014 Gibraltar tournament. And black played e6, and as we can see, black is really trying to go for very dynamic play here, trying to sacrifice some pawns in order to make this work. But if we are, well, let's put it that way, if we're greedy in the right way, then this is still quite bad for black. So take on f7, bishop to b2, planning to take here with the bishop. Bishop b7, bishop takes d4. This is still the game. Knight e6, bishop e3, and as we can sort of see, there's not that much to worry about, but black sort of tries to continue with two pawns down to cause some trouble. So knight g4 is a nice move, because if we remove our bishop, bishop to c5 might come. but knight to d2. Now if he takes on e3 and plays bishop c5, I guess we can just protect the pawn with our king, among others. So for example, I guess king f2 could be fine. And I don't see directly how black is looking to regain the pawn. So here rook to e8 was played, rook b1, attacking b7, knight c5, bishop e2, and black regained the pawn in the end. And it's just here that the white player, Jonas Lampert, didn't manage to find the very best way, because he could have simply castled in this position, which is a very important move. We're safeguarding our king, and of course we're playing on the tactic that after rook takes e2, knight d4 check, we're picking up the rook. So that's d5. By no means a very good move, but please keep in mind the line here with d4 and queen a4 check. That's the most important thing. After that, all those precise moves, of course they're useful to have, but you should at least know this line approximately up to here. And after that, it's just black trying to equalize and not really succeeding in doing so. So how does black actually play after c3 if all these normal looking moves like knight f6 and d5 are not that great? He tries to go into some sort of French structure with e6. So e6, d4, d5 is the line. And here he's really inviting us to try e5. And while some players may argue that the variation with a6 here is kind of a waste of a move in the French advanced variation, but I honestly think that it's a move that is included in several of the big lines, and there's really not much point to learn such a big line just for people who play the O'Kelly. So I suggest e takes d5 over here. E takes d5, once again, queen takes d5, it's always sort of the same trick. We can go, for example, bishop to e3, and I just don't think a6 is very useful. These types of positions, even if you're not really familiar with isolated pawn positions, it's just not a very good way for black to play. So e takes d5 is what players go for instead, and here we go bishop to d3. If they play knight c6 over here, which is kind of the logical move, there is this annoying check queen to e2. And of course the idea is that if bishop to e7 happens, we can just take on c5, and white's better. If bishop to e6 is played, we can go castle, and now we're threatening to move knight to g5. And after c takes d4, knight takes d4, it looks fairly equal at first, but it actually turns out that we have this idea of f4, f5, and I think that white's initiative is quite strong, and once again it's rather one-sided in these types of positions. I really don't think that black has all that much to hope for counterplay wise. So queen e2 check is an important move to fight against knight c6, and actually it's for this reason that the main move here is c4. Obviously c takes d4 could be played, but I think after both knight takes and c takes, white is the more pleasant position. Once again, the main idea is really that this move a6, it may have forced us to go for this type of new structure and new way of dealing with the line, but in the end it's not a very useful move for black. So by playing c4, at least black tries to argue that maybe he could go b5 and strengthen this pawn on c4 and make some use of this move. But after bishop to d6, most players over here decided to castle, and after knight e7, b3, b5, turned out that they have black is sort of okay after changing a couple of pawns here on the queen side. Instead, to be precise, you should start with b3 here. And the idea is that if a4, cb, bishop takes b3, now we can see that both pawns are actually hanging. So b5 and d5 are hanging. And instead of giving black the chance to defend one of these pawns by including the move short castle, we no longer allow him to exchange more pieces on the queen side, and thereby taking out a little bit of the pressure. So what does black have to do after b3? I think the best idea for him is just to go c takes b3, and quite frankly it might seem like a small advantage, but of course this is a better pawn structure for white. Black will always have the isolated d-pawn, and yeah, just a matter of more pawn islands, and also white having the chance to maybe break through in the center more strongly with c4. So a sample line over here would be knight e7, which is generally how black likes to play here. Castle, castle, rook to e1, knight c6, a matter of developing the pieces. And I like the idea of putting the knight into e3 in these types of positions. For example, if black decides to change the bishops, now he might have some ideas with knight to b4. I like putting the queen on d3, then knight to e3, and as you can see indicated by arrows, something like rook a2, rook e2, followed by c4 seems quite pleasant for white. And once again, I'm not claiming this is a huge advantage. I actually think that because pretty much this is the only way for white to really fight for an advantage, the O'Kelly is not that bad of an opening in a way, but it's also definitely not something I would like to play as black. Once again, I still think black is a bit worse here. We have a fairly easy piece play, we have a better pawn structure, so it may be little, but it's very steady, and it's a long-term advantage that we can nurture over here as white. So that's it. That's the last part of my Sicilian series. I hope you all enjoyed it, and if you have any questions, feel free to comment on the video in question. I might have time to have a look at your questions. This was my repertoire against the Sicilian, and I hope to see you back in future series, and let me know if you enjoyed it. Thank you very much. This was Robin for Chess24.